Hi, I'm KennyTheWhale. I'm an aspiring game developer with a psychology background, currently making a 2D action platformer. I'll be analysing the designs of levels in some of my favourite games, and using what I find to inform level designs in my own game. I figured I would share the process with you all, as well as some music covers and eventually original music. I'll start with my interpretation of the level Seashore War from Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, just because that was the level that I'd gotten up to in the game. I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to split this video into two main parts: how the level's design and structure promote fun gameplay, and how they convey the narrative of this part of the game. In 2015, Mark Brown of Game Maker's Toolkit made a video on the 4-step level design of Super Mario 3D World, a design philosophy developed by director Koichi Hayashida. In Step 1, a game mechanic is introduced in a safe environment. In Step 2, the mechanic is developed further, mainly more of it, but with safety removed. In Step 3 comes the twist. Later in the level, you are challenged with the mechanic in more inventive ways, such as combining it with other mechanics. This gives the new mechanic some freshness to stop it from becoming stale and repetitive. Then in Step 4 comes the conclusion, the final chance to show off your mastery of the mechanic and feel a sense of accomplishment. 2 years later, Mark Brown made another video in which he explained that Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze takes the same 4-step design philosophy, but expands it by introducing multiple new mechanics within the same level. Looking back on my playthrough of Seashore War last week, I couldn't help but agree. At the start of the level, we are introduced to the first new mechanic in relative safety. It's an iceberg that falls slowly as you stand on it, and tips sideways if you run towards its edges. The only threat is the fish being thrown towards you, which is an enemy attack pattern encountered plenty of times previously in the game, so it's no big deal. In fact, the falling iceberg kind of protects you from it by moving you underneath the fish, and you can use them as an aid to collect the first Kong letter, rewarding you for your bravery and execution. The iceberg mechanic is then developed in the next section, with the enemies floating between multiple icebergs, adding some challenge. I can't remember if we've encountered the enemy before in the game, but assuming it's new, you're given a free barrel that lets you test if you can kill the enemy by throwing an object at it, which I failed to do here, but you can. Next, we go back to Step 1 as a second new mechanic gets introduced, the ability to pull a sinking ship back up. You have nowhere else to go, the cliff is too high up, and the section below is submerged in freezing water. You're forced to notice and pull up the thingy, is that a rope? Which shows you the mechanic. Then when you smash the platforms to reach the jigsaw piece below, something you've done previously in the game many times, you're introduced to the fact that the ship sinks back down over time, just like the iceberg. By persevering to grab the jigsaw piece, you're rewarded for your bravery, while getting a sense of the danger you're involved in at this part of the game. More on that later. You also have a somewhat safe environment to test out the timing of the sinking of the ship. In between showcasing the new mechanics, the level gives you little breaks for pacing. They're filled in with previously learnt mechanics and secrets for observant players to find. Further development of the iceberg mechanic follows, with the fire enemy ramping up the challenge. This particular enemy also provides a contrasting juxtaposition with the icy theme of the level, which may make the enemy feel more dangerous since fire melts ice. Then the ship mechanic enters Step 2, being developed by the threat of the enemies on board, and the risk-reward of collecting bananas and the second Kong letter. From here, there is a lot more development of both mechanics throughout the level. It's at this point here where I feel that Step 3 arrives for both mechanics, a twist that combines them both and subverts your expectations, creating a sense of panic. This ship here is falling like the icebergs, so we will be searching for a thingy that never appears. On top of this, you have bombs being thrown at you, and you're forced to get used to the platforms falling in a wheel motion rather than straight downwards. Now we're reaching the end of the level, and it's your final chance to pull a ship up, that mechanic's conclusion. Particularly observant players are rewarded for their forward planning and execution, if they're able to work out that they need to keep that jumping enemy alive in order to bounce off of it and reach the flower up there containing a jigsaw piece. If they kill the enemy without reaching it, I think only players who still have a Kong buddy like Dixie can manage to fly up from the iceberg, and that's difficult when you've got to jump off of the highest point of the iceberg while avoiding the blue floating enemies. Right after this is the conclusion of the falling iceberg, except this time there's ice falling onto you and destroying the platforms you're standing on. It's almost as if the ground that was supporting you before has now turned on you. But I think the real strength of this section is tied to the narrative of the level, which I'll talk about now in the second segment of the video. Many games use level design to tell a story without words. Again, there's a Mark Brown video on that. Tropical Freeze does this great here. The context behind this level is that the Kongs have returned to their homeland, and it's been taken over by the Snowmads, the Viking-like enemies you've been up against throughout the whole game. It's a sad, desperate scenario, and the level reflects this. The place has turned cold and frozen, like the hearts of the Snowmads who don't care about the local inhabitants. The icebergs are falling, like the tears of the monkeys. Okay, but real talk, cognitive psychology research has suggested that we associate up with good, and down with bad. There are competing theories about why we do this. For example, Lakoff and Johnson's conceptual-metaphor theory attributes this to the metaphors we learn in our language. In English, we say things like, I'm over the moon to mean happy, and I'm feeling down to mean sad. More recently, the association has been explained by researchers like Lakins using polarity theory, which proposes that our minds process things differently depending on whether we consider them to be plus or minus on a mental polarity scale. So for example, up and happy would be plus polar, while down and sad would be minus polar. It's all part of this wider embodied cognition or grounded cognition perspective that ties our mental images and processes to sensory and environmental experiences like spatial position, your native language, or even the current temperature. This theory might predict that you were more likely to make some sort of polar bear pun in your head during this chat about polarity, since you've been looking at a cold, icy level full of penguins. So let me know whether you thought of polar bears or not. I'm interested. Anyway, regardless of why we make these associations, it's likely that they're at play here in Seashore War, whether it was deliberate from the designers or not. We probably associate things being positioned down and cold temperature with sadness. This may be because we have metaphors like calling people cold, or because both cold and down are minus polar, or maybe both. Here, we're in a cold climate, and things like the icebergs and ships are falling down, right underneath our feet. Our support is collapsing, and at the end of the level, if you remember, it even turns on us when the ice falls down to kill us. You can see how desperate Donkey Kong is as he pulls up the ship, trying to reverse the polarity and make things good again. But no matter what, it will keep sinking as the Snowmads overwhelm him. Even finishing the level isn't a cause for celebration anymore, as you watch the ice falling down and destroying his homeland. So much emotion and story is conveyed here without words. And of course, the emotional music composed by David Whitehouse, with its chilly instruments, slow tempo, and that uncomfortably yet beautifully high-pitched section at that one point of the song. You know which part. Now, this isn't specific to Seashore War, but I've always loved how games like Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie put all the challenges and objects in their levels inside the narrative and thematic context. For example, you're on icebergs and ships rather than generic coloured platforms like you would get in an old Mario game. Not that I don't love Mario, I've just always preferred this contextual approach to level design, and it's just something worth noting in my first video on this game. Anyway, I think this is a good point to end the video. In summary, Tropical Freeze makes use of the 4-step level design approach used in Mario 3D World, and as Mark Brown explained, it extends it with additional new mechanics. This is definitely seen throughout Seashore War with its 2 new mechanics. The narrative of the level is excellently conveyed through the cold climate and spatial downness running throughout the level, most likely due to grounded cognition. If you want to read up more on grounded cognition, conceptual-metaphor theory, and polarity theory, or check out any of the Mark Brown videos I mentioned, all of the links and references are in the description if you didn't catch them in the video. I might also put a few more interesting and relevant links for you. Let me know what you thought about this video, and whether I should make more like it. Thanks for watching.